What is persuasion? The simple definition might be getting someone to do what you want them to. But, in fact, persuasion, in its more subtle definition, involves all of our communication with other people. Simply getting someone to understand what you mean is a form of persuasion. The way you reach someone else, the way you tell them how you feel, is through words. And we all know an abundance of these. They pour out of us at unthinkable and often uncontrollable speed. Yet, it is seldom that they really communicate what we want to express. Can you recall the excitement and pleasure you feel when you talk to someone who really understands you? That's a rare moment indeed. But why does it happen only in a rare and fleeting moment? What is the problem in getting through to people? The answer is a simple one. The same thing that allows us to communicate with each other in a spoken language also prevents us from really understanding each other. We are all human. You have your own set of emotions to deal with, but so does the other person. We forget that the other person is human too. We forget to make allowance for his human emotions and feelings, while we are only too aware of our own. But as we have feelings and pride and fears, so does the other guy. If you were talking to a machine, you would have no problem getting through, because a machine has no pre-existing attitudes that might conflict with your own, no emotions to distract it from what you are saying, no secrets it wants to keep hidden from you, no ego that demands gratification. But other people are not machines. They have a mind and emotions entirely separate from your own. Unlike machines, other people do have preconceived opinions. They have emotions unknown to you that tug at their objective minds, secrets they may want to keep, egos that need to be fed. All of these things can keep another person from relating freely to you and your ideas. No matter how healthy and well-adjusted an individual is, he still has opinions, emotions, and an ego. Your job, then, in establishing communication with another person and getting across your ideas to him, is to know how to deal with these innate human characteristics. You are going to learn how to successfully transverse this human obstacle course. The first thing we want to consider in this program is how to establish receptivity in the other person. How to, in a word, neutralize him so that the ideas you want him to accept will be planted in fertile soils. To do this, you must know how to put a person at ease and make him like you. When a person likes you and feels that you can be trusted, he will automatically be more receptive to your ideas. Think of the people you know that you really like. Why do you like them? Because they are witty, clever, generous, rich? You might think of any of these reasons, and even more. But probably the real reason you like them is because of the way they make you feel. We judge people by the feelings they elicit from us. People you like make you feel happy, comfortable, at ease. They make you feel secure. And that's the real reason you like them, not because they're smart or beautiful or give you lots of gifts. Conversely, we instinctively dislike people who make us feel anxious, uncomfortable, or inhibited. In analyzing our own response to other people, we can pick up a few clues of how we can treat others to make them feel secure and at ease. First, you must believe wholeheartedly that other people are important. When you are aware of this one vital human condition, you will understand how to make the ideas I am going to illustrate work. Let me say right now that if you do not believe it, there is no point in going any further. You must be genuinely sincere in your belief. This entire course is based on making people respond to you by paying attention to their needs, by showing them respect and appreciation. If you are faking that you like someone, they will know it. Everyone, even the person with a completely deflated ego, can spot a phony. If you praise someone, then pat yourself on the back for being such a nice guy. You will be tapped for what you are immediately. Throughout this course, I will tell you how to pay compliments, how to work around the other person's ego. When I tell you these kinds of things, you must remember that if you do it in any way that is superficial or phony, it will never work. Right now, at the outset, you must keep in mind that everyone deserves your respect and consideration, whether they can give you something or not. You cannot practice these persuasive techniques only on the people you want something from. You must learn how to give each individual the respect and admiration he needs and deserves, just as you do. Here are a few suggestions for laying a receptive foundation in other people. This is necessary because even though we may think people are important and worthy of our respect, we don't always know how to express it in concrete ways. Here are some very concrete things you can do to show people that you think they are important. First of all, pay attention to people. Notice them. Be conscious of their existence. You're shopping in a store, and the clerk writing the ticket on your purchase seems nervous and distraught. You may very well notice this. But how often do you say, "I'll bet you've had a rough day today. You don't have to rush for me." Depending on the person, your comment may very well release a flood of pent-up emotion. It doesn't really matter what kind of response you get in this kind of situation. What is important is that you noticed someone else and took the trouble to comment. This is what I mean by being aware or conscious of other people. The second crucial factor you can learn in dealing with people is to listen to them. Most of us want to be thought of as intelligent, clever people. But usually, the person who does the most talking is not the one thought of as clever or smart. If you really want to be thought of as intelligent, listen. Listen and pay attention to what the other person has to say. That person will be sure in his mind that you are very wise indeed. Listening is more than just a passive exercise. Listening and encouraging the other person to talk can give you the edge in any person-to-person negotiation. The other person, in talking, gives away his position. This, in turn, gives you more information to use in making your own decisions. Listening also gives you more time to give real thought to the question. In any dealings you have with other people, your most important information is their real feelings and their position on the matter. In order to be fully effective, the listener must be an active partner in the conversation, even if he says nothing. So here are some hints for more effective listening. Look directly at the person speaking to you. Concentrate on what he is saying. You might even lean toward him slightly, as though you're trying even harder to catch every word. Ask questions that are pertinent to what he is saying, but don't interrupt with irrelevant questions. Encourage him to continue. You can guide the conversation with questions, but make sure that you stick to his subject. When you want to make a point, repeat what the speaker has said first. Use his own words back at him, and then elaborate on them, getting your own point over. Remember that all the while someone is speaking to you, even if you think you've heard it all before, he is really telling you something about himself, the kind of person he is, what he wants from you, and moreover, what he needs from you. This is your ultimate key to persuasion. Listen first. In your attitude toward other people, it is important that you never be condescending. If you truly believe that the other person is important and worthy of your respect, this is not likely to happen. In your dealings with others, be generous with praise. Praise is magic in getting people to respond to you, and they must first respond before you can go about the task of persuasion. So always look for something in the other person to compliment, to approve. If it is something small that most people wouldn't notice, so much the better. When you notice subtle things about another person's personality, it shows them that you're really paying attention to him. For instance, it doesn't take too much attention to know that an accountant is good at figures. But if you notice that he has a keen eye for interior design, then you are paying attention and your praise means something. Small courtesies will get you a long way in laying a receptive foundation for working relationships. These are the kinds of things that mean, I think you are important. First, always be on time for appointments. When you are late, it doesn't mean that you are irresponsible. It means that you don't care about the person you are meeting. You don't think he's important enough to be on time for. Second, when someone is calling on you, never keep him waiting, no matter how unimportant he may seem. If for some reason you must keep him waiting, make sure that he is seated comfortably and there is someone to look after his needs. The third small courtesy you can extend to people that costs you nothing, yet means something to everyone, is to say thank you. Be very generous with your thank yous. Spread them around. Let them work for you. You can enhance the impact of a thank you by always adding the person's name to it, by saying those magic words when they are least expected, by really meaning it. Let's briefly review the ways you can lay a receptive foundation in other people. First, truly believe that other people are important and worthy of your respect. Second, pay attention to people. Notice them. Become aware of the feelings and problems of everyone you meet. Third, listen. When you listen to someone with interest, it makes him feel important and secure. It also makes you appear intelligent, since the speaker will think if you really listen to him, you must be smart. Finally, listening is your biggest advantage in the technique or persuasion, because the other person, if he talks long enough, will always reveal his position and let you know what it is he needs and wants from you. Fourth, be generous with praise. Sincere praise invariably attracts others. So always look for something to compliment and approve in others, particularly something most people wouldn't notice. Fifth, remember the importance of small courtesies. Be on time for appointments. When you keep people waiting, it says to them loud and clear, I don't think you are important enough. And finally, remember those magic words, thank you, especially when they are unexpected. Pay attention, listen, praise, and pay small courtesies. These all add up to one big statement from you to the other person. I think you are important. When you get that point across, you have laid the groundwork for persuasion. Lay this kind of foundation in all your relationships. Every person you meet is entitled to this respect. Let's continue now and really get into what makes people tick. When you meet someone for the first time, the impression is a lasting one. It is essential that you begin on the right foot. However, you impress a person at your first meeting. That is the way he will think of you forever. It is important, therefore, that you understand that others accept you at your own evaluation. Others see you just as you see yourself. If you believe that you are a dullard, if you believe that no one notices you, if you believe that you are lost in the mainstream of society, isn't it logical that others will believe it too? But as you believe other people are important and worthy of admiration, so are you. Therefore, before you set about the task of making other people feel important, make sure that you feel important too. Here are some ways to give the impression of confidence, because even if at first you do not inwardly feel that you are an important person, you can go through the outward motions. Soon enough, these outward motions latch on to your inward feelings, and they will become a real part of your personality. Begin to cultivate confidence by enhancing your physical image. It goes without saying that you should always be carefully dressed, always immaculate in appearance. Nothing is more distracting to other people, especially people you are trying to persuade, than someone who is sloppy or disheveled. Remember, your first impression is a visual one, so automatically take good care of your physical appearance. The second impression you send out is a vocal one. Is your voice well-pitched and clear? Do you know how to speak up but not shout? Developing a pleasant, controlled speaking voice is of vital importance in your dealings with others. Should you have a problem in this area, it's well worth your time and effort to take a few lessons in voice projection and control. How often have you heard a man say, "I thought that was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen," until she opened her mouth? A poor speaking voice is equally offensive in a man or a woman, and it is so easy to correct. So don't delay if you have this kind of problem. Do something about it. The next thing you can do for your image of self-confidence is to carry yourself with confidence. Check out your posture. Do some daily exercises to loosen your muscles and increase your feeling of physical well-being. Have you noticed how athletes walk? They almost glide above the ground, exuding grace and confidence. Try raising yourself up when you walk, almost as if you didn't have to touch the ground. Straighten your spine. Keep your head up and your shoulders straight. Do this consciously. If you feel stiff and awkward, do it anyway. Believe me, you won't look awkward. You will look relaxed and confident and self-assured. Always remember to hold your head up, physically and mentally. Whenever you feel anxious or insecure in any situation, remember to hold up your head. You can only cultivate confidence by doing it. Thinking about it isn't enough, and you should begin doing it right this very minute. This element of self-confidence is extremely important because you control the actions and attitudes of others by your own actions and attitudes. Your own attitude is reflected right back to you by other people, just as if you were a looking glass. If you approach another person with hostility, it is preposterous to think he will be pleasant and agreeable to you. However, if you approach him with warmth and respect, you make it impossible for him to behave any differently toward you. You arouse exactly the same reaction in others as you display toward them. You can create enthusiasm for your ideas by acting enthusiastic in your presentation. In fact, this is the only way you can create real enthusiasm. You can present the most clever idea in the world to someone backed up by logical and profitable information. They may agree with you entirely, but they will not have real enthusiasm for your project unless you yourself have enthusiasm. After all, why should they? If you, the creator of the idea, do not believe in it, why should they? The same thing is true of confidence. If you have confidence in yourself and your ideas, others will too. But if you don't, they cannot. You come first. You are the key that unlocks all the doors of your success. Just as you are able to cultivate confidence in outward motions, so can you cultivate enthusiasm. Practice being enthusiastic. Pretend. Act it out. Because enthusiasm is the most catching emotion among humans. You'll soon catch it yourself. Charge yourself with the act of enthusiasm. Then let it show. Suppose you're going into a meeting to present a new idea to a prospective customer. You could say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Jones. I have an idea here I'd like to tell you about." Or you could say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Jones. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to see you today. I have a wonderful project to show you that I know you'll be interested in." Now, which method do you think would have more appeal to Mr. Jones? Moreover, beyond the actual words you use, you must let the enthusiasm shine through your voice. Practice enthusiasm outwardly, and just like confidence, it will soon be coming directly from your inner feelings. Now let's go back over these last few steps. Your first impression is a lasting one. How you think of yourself is how others will think of you. You must, therefore, learn how to cultivate goodwill toward yourself. You can do this first by outwardly increasing your confidence and self-assurance. Always dress well. Make sure your physical appearance is at its best. Your first impression is a visual one. Secondly, cultivate a good speaking voice. You should be able to be heard without raising your voice. Carry yourself with confidence. Good posture makes you look taller and full of self-assurance. Always hold your head up. That means your real head and your inner mind. All of these things show outwardly to everyone you meet that you like yourself, that you are a person of worth. Remember, you control the actions and attitudes of others by your own actions and attitudes. Your own attitude is reflected back to you by other people. If you act hostile, others reflect it back. If you act with enthusiasm, so will the other person. If you act with confidence, others will have confidence in you. The next thing you should keep in mind when meeting people is that you don't have to impress them. You do not have to be clever or witty or tell funny stories. The only clue to impressing other people is to let them know that they are making a good impression on you. This is a natural result of the points we mentioned earlier: listening and paying attention. You further increase the effect of letting them make a good impression on you by drawing them out, by asking questions and listening with interest to what the other person has to tell you. Although it is good to find areas where you can agree with what the other person is saying, never try to top him with tales of your own exploits. You sound the keynote when you begin a meeting. If you start out formally, the proceedings will continue on a formal basis. If you start out with a note of apology in your voice, you put yourself at a disadvantage because you will be apologizing for the next hour. If you begin on a business-like note, the meeting will continue to be businesslike. And if you begin on a friendly note, you have set the stage for a friendly, receptive meeting. I can't stress the value of knowing this effect too much. Everything depends on your getting started right, and it's within your control. So think carefully before you meet with someone just exactly what form you would like that meeting to take. Then proceed accordingly. As you get into your conversation with others, there are some very important points to remember. Here is the most critical. Negative opinions create a negative atmosphere. You must charge the meeting with positive vibrations. A negative atmosphere arises out of minor, seemingly inconsequential statements. You might say something as unimportant as, "Gee, it's a lousy day today." And by doing so, you have permitted the element of negativism to join your meeting. Think about this consciously before any meeting with another person. Think about what you are going to say, and make sure you say it in a positive way. Stretch out positiveness when you ask questions of another person, especially when you want to sell them something or persuade them to your way of thinking. Never phrase a question like this: "You don't like this color, do you?" Instead, phrase it in a positive way. "Isn't this a nice color?" Or, "This is a lovely color. It goes well with your color scheme." Everything you say can be turned into a positive statement, even if it is a question. You must consciously make an effort to keep your thinking positive. Help yourself to do this by reading books on positive thinking. You will understand the power and influence that a positive statement has on another person, and how negative thoughts can depress others and turn them away from you. It is essential that you really make an effort to develop positive thinking, because usually our negative statements are so subtle that we don't notice them, but others do. They may not know exactly why they react in a certain way, but nevertheless the effect is there.
Take positive statements one step further. Are you the kind of person who makes negative statements about his work or the company you work for, or perhaps your competition? If you are, watch it. In other words, don't be a sorehead. If you have problems like this, keep it to yourself. Even better, try saying positive things about your company and see if your feelings don't change. The point is, people don't think well of you if you are always knocking things. To reiterate, to get your meeting started on the right foot, don't try to impress people. Let them impress you. Do this by asking questions and listening with interest to what they have to tell you. Never try to top the other person with stories of your own. You sound the keynote when you begin the meeting. If you start formally, proceedings will be formal. If you begin on a friendly note, you have set the stage for a friendly meeting. Think this over carefully before you meet with someone, because once begun, you will find it difficult to change the tone of the meeting. Try to charge your meeting with a positive atmosphere. Make your statements and questions positive ones. Don't ask questions that imply that you expect trouble. Always be positive and assume that the other person will be also. Make a determined effort to develop positive thinking, because you may be sending out negative thoughts without even realizing it. And finally, don't knock the competition. Whenever you say negative things about anyone or anything, other people want to withdraw from you. We all like to be around people who make us feel good, and we all want to get away from people who make us feel depressed. When you want to attract people to you, remember this cardinal rule. To be a persuasive individual that others trust and respond to, you must remember these important points about everyone's personality. Everyone wants to feel important. The most fascinating word to a human being is me. That goes for you and me and the person you want to persuade. Find a way to raise a person's self-esteem, and you have found a way to get your point of view across. This is because people act or fail to act to enhance their own ego. When you want to persuade someone to act in a certain way, give him a reason that will enhance his ego. Do you recall the classic story about King George and the early American colonies? The colonialists wanted to start a new colony in the South, but all of their logical arguments were in vain because King George was against it. At last, in desperation, a member of the petitioning group spoke up and said, "We forgot to mention that we want to name the new colony for the king." And this is how Georgia became one of the original 13 colonies. When logic failed, the petitioners sought King George's ego and gave it a boost. And it's an irresistible method. Keep this theory in mind, because you will see how it weaves in and out of the rest of our program. Persuasion is not winning arguments. Getting someone to change his mind is not the same thing as arguing him down, as the story of King George aptly demonstrates. Nobody ever won an argument is an old saying that has more than a grain of truth in it, because if you force someone to agree with you, you have only made him your enemy. But when you can persuade him to your way of thinking, you can get him to do what you want him to with his full cooperation, and he will like you for it. Therefore, for the student of human nature, there are ways to win an argument. First, never let the argument deteriorate into a shouting session or battle. Remember what we said about your attitude being reflected back to you? If you shout, the other person will shout. If he shouts at you, but you answer in a level, calm voice, he cannot continue to shout. It is virtually impossible to answer a calm, quiet voice with anger. Therefore, before it begins, deflect the other person's anger with your own calmness. The harder you fight, the stronger your argument, the stronger the position will be. Once you have eliminated the anger from your voice and the other person's, the channels are open for discussion. The biggest mistake most people make in an argument is to attack the other person's ego. Once that has been done, there is no chance of winning. Just as enhancing the other person's ego gives you a way of persuading him, attacking his ego ensures you that you will never persuade him. You attack the other person's ego when you reduce the argument to a personal level. For example, someone comes to you with an idea that you feel is not worthwhile. You attack his ego when you say, "Your idea is awful," instead of, "I don't think this thing will work." When trying to persuade someone to your point of view, always let him state his case completely. Don't interrupt, and make sure you listen to him. If you listen correctly, you will convince him that you are interested in his side, that you care about what he has to say, even if you have absolutely no intention of doing it. Then, pause before you answer him. This pause indicates to him that you are thinking about what he has said. It also gives you the opportunity to organize your own thoughts. Make the pause fairly short, however, or he may feel that you don't really have a firm grasp of the subject. Never simply gloss over his statements by quickly answering, "Yes, but," and then lunging at him with your own ideas. After you have acknowledged his point of view, you are free to state your own case. Do this moderately and accurately, being sure that you are not overstating your thoughts. In other words, don't hard sell your ideas. This convinces the other person that you really know what you're talking about and that you are on firm ground. There's an additional way you can make your argument more convincing without seeming to force it onto the other person. Instead of saying, "I think such and such," use what is known as third-person endorsement. Tell him that John D. Rockefeller says this is a good way to increase profits, or that this is the kind of golf club that Arnold Palmer uses. Or you can quote statistics from an accredited source. All of these things put your argument into the mouths of others, and therefore make it easier for the other fellow to accept. This is the entire premise behind advertising. It is the reason major corporations hire agencies and famous people to do their selling for them. So you can let other people do your selling for you, too. Not long ago, my next-door neighbor considered buying a piano from a famous brand manufacturer. When he went into the showroom and sat before one of their instruments, a salesman came over to him and said, "Isn't that interesting that you should pick out that particular piano? I just sold the identical instrument to Steve Allen this morning." Did my neighbor buy that particular model piano? You bet he did. He knew that Steve Allen is an excellent musician. If he picked that instrument, my neighbor could be sure it was a good one. Further, he wanted to have the same piano in his house as Steve Allen did. Getting back to your argument, in persuading people to your viewpoint, remember that you don't have to be 100% right and make him 100% wrong. There are areas of agreement in every argument. Make sure to bring these out. This is, of course, losing the battle, but winning the war. Finally, always let the other person save face. The Japanese are masters of this art, and you can be too. Don't back the person up against the wall. Leave an opening for him to get away with his pride intact. You can give him an out, such as letting him attribute the argument to someone else. Or you can say, "In your position, I'm sure I would have thought just as you did." Here, then, are the essential factors of winning an argument. 1, don't bother arguing until you've stopped arguing. That is, keep the shouting out of it. You can't win if you're yelling. Deflect the other person's anger by remaining calm. 2, avoid bringing the other person's ego into play. Keep the discussion on the objective target, never on the individual. 3, let the other person state his case fully. 4, listen to him. Let him know that you have an open mind. 5. Pause before you answer. This will show him that you really are thinking about what he said. 6. State your case moderately and accurately. 7. Use third-person endorsement. And finally, 8th, let the other person save face. Supposing you have done all of these things, and you still haven't been able to change someone's mind. Here are some areas of resistance that you can become aware of and learn how to overcome. When you are trying to persuade someone to your way of thinking, you should expect them to first pass through a stage of resistance. This is perfectly normal. In order for someone to agree with you, he must first give up the position he already holds. If his mind were empty to begin with, like the machine we were talking about earlier, he might easily accept your ideas. Your thoughts could rush in to fill up the empty spaces. But as we have said before, people have ideas and positions of their own on just about everything. You might think that you should apply pressure when your opposition is vehement, and when someone agrees with you, you might think your job is done. Actually, just the opposite is true. One danger sign that you should always be on the lookout for is the person who agrees with you too readily. Often people don't want to argue with you, so they simply agree, even though they have no intention of complying with your wishes. Therefore, they pay you lip service. They agree with you just to put an end to the conversation. For instance, you ask a client to come over and visit your production plant so that you can convince him that your facilities are superior to your competitor, who he is presently doing business with. He says, "Oh, sure, I'd be glad to do that sometime." That's the point where you must press home for a commitment. If you ask him to set a specific date and he hedges, you know that he is resisting the idea. If he becomes irritated and wants to drop the subject, zero in on his reaction. Try to bring out his reservations. Suggest to him that he seems annoyed, that perhaps he feels reluctant. Try to draw him out and find out the real reasons he doesn't want to go. This kind of pressure is very delicate, and you must be very careful when you apply it. If you are too forceful, you may alienate the other person entirely. In another example, if you are an employer who has requested a subordinate to perform a particular job, you should be aware of too casual an agreement. If the employee just nods his head and barely acknowledges that he has heard you, you should ask for further commitment. Request that he tell you specifically when or how he intends to do the job. If you are a salesman, and we all are at one time or another, you know that sometimes a prospective client simply nods his head without committing himself. This is when you should explore further. Ask for the order. If he puts you off, ask if there are any particular reasons that prevent the client from committing himself. Does he have any questions you can answer for him? If he replies that he wants to think about it for a while, ask when you can call him for an answer. Pressing for specifics is a way to keep the channel of communications open. And when communication is open, persuasion is always imminent. Active opposition is a very positive sign in persuasion because it means the channels of communication and persuasion are still open. It shows that the other person is involved in your idea. Often, just some strong facts to back up your position may persuade him that you are right, although he may not admit it instantly. But there is a kind of opposition that cannot be fought with logic. This is called irrational opposition. Irrational opposition means that while you are arguing persuasively in a rational and logical manner, the other person is reacting in an emotional way that has nothing to do with logic. When you encounter irrational opposition, you must abandon logical argument and get to the emotional basis of what is bothering the other person. Here are some signs of irrational opposition. When the other person argues vehemently, when he opposes your idea with more intensity than is warranted, it seems that he isn't at all sure of his own position. He may very well want to adopt your position, but at the same time, he feels he must fight for his own position. Unusual vehemence, then, is irrational opposition. When an individual is totally unresponsive to your ideas, when he won't even consider your counter-arguments, he is telling you that he has a reason for doing so, that he has completely hidden from you. He isn't open to new information. He simply wants to keep what he has because it serves some private, hidden need. If he bombards you with irrelevant arguments to your proposals, he is showing irrational opposition of another kind. These unrelated arguments are an effort to conceal the real ones. Therefore, as with a completely unresponsive attitude, irrelevant arguments also indicate a hidden reason for opposition. Trying to rationalize an illogical objection is a fourth indication of irrational opposition. People may exaggerate their own arguments, or try to minimize yours in an attempt to give a rational facade to their position. They use guesses and wishes as facts. Again, it is the concealed motive that you must unearth. The final clue to irrational opposition is the continual objection. As soon as you answer one objection a person has, he comes up with another one. Sometimes he doesn't even let you finish one before he hits you with another. If his objection and your answer were really important to him, he would listen carefully and think it over before answering. He would dwell on what you had to say and try to grasp it firmly instead of leaping immediately to another objection. Generally, when you're trying to influence thinking and are faced with opposition, watch for an overly intense emotional reaction of grasping your ideas. When you encounter any of these, you might as well abandon your current line of argument, because it will have no bearing on the other person's real basis of resistance, his hidden irrational opposition. These, then, are the 5 clues to irrational opposition. 1, vehemence. 2, unresponsiveness. 3, irrelevant arguments. 4, rationalization of a faulty viewpoint. And 5, continual objections. While rational opposition is largely a matter of weighing both sides of the question and arriving at a conclusion, irrational opposition, on the other hand, has nothing whatever to do with facts and can't be countered with facts. Inner conflict can intensify opposition to irrational extents. When opposition becomes vehement, the first thing you should do is retreat to a neutral position. Additional pressure and argument can only become counterproductive. Step back from the problem and reiterate the argument from both sides. Be generous in conceding points to the other person's side. As you explore the problem in this way, the irrational vehemence of his argument may diminish, and he can be won over. You should deal with irrational opposition in much the same way you would deal with the overflowing emotions of another person. Show understanding. When you feel that the other person's opposition is irrational, accept his viewpoint. Understand his position. Say something such as, "In your place, I know I'd feel the same way." Then proceed to draw him out, asking sympathetic questions until you get to the real cause of his resistance. It's likely that he doesn't know the real reason for his resistance any more than you do. But if you can draw him out and lead him with a sympathetic ear, you both will be able to find out just what the problem is. If he is completely unresponsive to your ideas, you can make him aware of his resistance by using such phrases as, "You don't seem to be very interested in discussing this with me. Is there anything I've done to annoy you?" He'll be surprised that you noticed, and perhaps by accepting his lack of response and apparent annoyance, he will be able to tell you about it. In problems like these, what is important is to know what lies behind them. Once you have established the real reason for the resistance, you can effectively deal with it. Finally, evaluate the other person's objections with him. Many times, people do not persuade others of their argument because they just keep repeating their own ideas. So first, look at his objections carefully. Then you can answer his questions and present your viewpoint. Let us review, in conclusion, the ways of handling irrational opposition. Take a neutral position. Step back from the problem and reiterate the argument from both sides. Be generous in conceding points to the other person's side. Show understanding. Accept the other person's viewpoint, even though it is irrational. Draw him out by asking sympathetic questions. Encourage him to talk about what is bothering him. Do not take anything he says as a personal affront. Try to get the real reasons for his resistance. And finally, evaluate the other person's objections with him. Do not keep repeating your arguments. Look at his objections carefully before presenting your ideas. Always remember your objective, not to win, but to persuade.